And now Niall has an entire array of notes, an Oxford debate, 3 hours worth of notes to prove me wrong.
Well, I think you are wrong. I mean, that's no surprise.
No, none.
But I think that, look, let's get the obvious thing out of the way first. What happened in Boulder was wrong. What happened here in DC was wrong. Attacking anyone for their race or religion is wrong. That obviously includes Palestinian Americans, like those Palestinian students in Vermont who were shot, the 6-year-old boy, Palestinian American, stabbed to death. Those are all wrong. Now, you are using isolated acts of violence to delegitimize the argument against what Israel is doing in Gaza.
No, I'm not. I am saying that when you wear an outfit that has become the uniform of terrorists, that wear that outfit to kill mass numbers of people, and you chant the slogans of those same people who kill mass numbers of Jews, then you are a friend, an ally of the terrorists, and we should treat you as such.
No, that's not right. For a start, it is not true that the Keffiyeh is the uniform of terrorists, as you put it. It is a symbol of Palestinian nationhood.
No, it's a symbol of Palestinian resistance.
That nationhood has been crushed, or tried to be crushed, by military subjugation over decades. The West Bank, occupied land, illegally occupied by Israel for decades.
Let's have this conversation without talking about Israel, because with the difference that you make point when you talk about the Palestinian kids who were, one of whom was murdered, a couple of whom were stabbed. Yes, it's important. There's not thousands of Jews out there chanting and celebrating this. In fact, it was the Jewish communities in America who were the first to condemn it and say how awful it was. It is the pro-Palestinian groups that are out there chanting and celebrating this kind of behavior.
Leland, just today, Lindsey Graham, a Republican senator, was joking about Greta Thunberg drowning because she is on a boat seeking to break the blockade of Gaza. Randy Fine, Republican congressman, referring to Palestinians as demons.
Okay, so just if you want to say this, why is Greta Thunberg on some boat? By the way, I think they should let her into Gaza and let her stay as long as she would like. It would be great. She's gonna love it there, especially how they treat women. Interestingly enough, though, she's not trying to break through the Egyptian land border to Gaza, now is she? And there's a reason for that. Everyone in these groups who's all out there chanting loves to talk about Gaza, the Palestinians, and the West Bank. I never hear them complaining about what Iran is doing to Muslims in Yemen or in Syria. I never hear them talk about what Turkey is doing to the Yazidis or what they are doing to the Kurds, or what Iraq is doing to the Kurds. And the reason is because it's not about Palestinians. It's about blaming the Jews and calling for the destruction of Israel.
It is not about blaming the Jews to criticize the most right-wing government in the history of the State of Israel, which Ehud Olmert, a former Israeli prime minister, said recently is guilty of war crimes.
Again, how can...
People should protest war crimes.
If you want to go out and protest that, that's fine. If you want to go hold up a sign that says Israel is committing war crimes, we can have that debate. That's not the debate we're having. You're trying to conflate the two. The debate we're having is that if you are going to wear a piece of clothing that was made famous by a man who was a avowed terrorist in Yasser Arafat,
and came to a peace stage during the Clinton administration,
which he then walked away from, after getting 99% of what he wanted, but I digress. The fact of the matter is that if you want to wear Keffiyehs, it is no different than wearing Klan hoods.
Absolute nonsense.
That's the exact
just nonsense. That analogy just doesn't work.
We can all agree if someone wears Klan hoods and Confederate flags, it would be wrong.
The government of Israel, underwritten by the government of the United States, is killing the Palestinians by the thousands, starving the Palestinians,
if you want to protest
openly
that,
saying we wish to do that. And people are wearing Keffiyehs or shouting Free Palestine because they rightly object to those grotesque actions by the government of Israel.
And they're shouting globalize the Intifada, which, by the way, is calling for an Intifada, which is the violent uprising against Jews. It's that simple.
It is resistance. Now, resistance, it's like shouting power to the people. Does that mean that you think poor people should have greater power, or does it mean you think you should go and shoot cops?
There's been a lot of people killed in the name of Intifada, but we've had a good conversation, my friend. Always fun.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.